Welcome back to Mental Wellness Evolution. I'm Jeff, and thanks for being here. This is part 7 of my 10-part talk series on the 10 most important lessons I've learned on my healing and wellness journey, okay? So lesson 7 is going to be about stress, how it leads to addictions, and the importance of developing healthy coping mechanisms, okay? So stress is one of those things in society, guys, that is absolutely killing people everywhere, okay? This is what happens to us when our sympathetic nervous system is triggered. We start to get what's called the stress response activated within us. The sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight nervous system. We get flooded with stress hormones. It becomes very uncomfortable inside of our bodies. Our bodies try to drive our thoughts. We get trapped in cycles of thinking and feeling and thinking and feeling, and we don't know how to get out of it. And as a result of the stress, oftentimes, guys, it leads to addictive behavior as a means to escape what's kind of going on inside of ourselves and in our lives, okay? So this is where we turn to those things. And this is stuff that I did for absolutely years and years and years. Alcohol was a big one for me. I smoked pot, I drank, I used hard drugs, pornography, anything that would get me out of my head, out of the stress, out of having to deal with what was going on inside of myself, because I had no clue how to deal with these things. And we learn these maladaptive behaviors at a young age. I mean, I grew up in a small town, Saskatchewan. One of the answers to everything was, hey, we go out and we drink, and we kind of forget about it, okay? And this is an important thing to realize too, guys, about stress, is that not only do we have our life stressors, like there's things in the world that we're never going to be able to get away from. There's always going to be stress, life stresses, people have kids, money, bills, that type of thing. But what we really struggle with in our lives and as humans is that we have the ability to turn on the stress response with our thoughts alone, okay? We think something and it produces a feeling and emotion with us. See, our brain can't tell the difference between an experience we're having in our lives and one we've created inside of our minds. So if we sit and think about things that stress us out, and we have an actual stressor in the world, say, financial or whatever, and then we sit and we focus on it, we perpetuate the stress response. We do the thinking and feeling, and it keeps us trapped in that endless loop of stressful thoughts, stressful feelings, stressful emotions, stressful thoughts, stressful thinking, stressful emotions. And we literally live like this on a day-to-day basis. And I mean, no organism anywhere is designed to live under the stress response for long term, okay? It was it's a system that was useful for us when we were kind of, living in the bushes and stuff like that. Hey, there's an outside threat. We mobilize our resources to get away from said threat. And then once we get back there, we go back to stasis. But because we utilize our minds keep the stress response activated. So you have an argument with your partner early on in the morning, and then you fester on that all day long. It's stress, 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 stress. We're flooding our bodies with that cortisol, that adrenaline, and it never gives us a chance to truly, ultimately relax. And then we, as an escape, we start turning to addiction. We start looking for relief in whatever form that we can find it in the world. And I mentioned some earlier, but there's plenty of other things, guys, from doom scrolling to gambling to food, anything that kind of gets us out of that space for a little while. Now, I'm not going to suggest that people shouldn't do some of these things all the time, or in small doses, they can be good. But if it's the only thing that we do that we know how to deal with stress, it's going to be a problem. And I used to drink every day to try to deal with these things, and you'd have the problems in your day and you don't know how to deal with them. So you go home and you get drunk. Problem is you wake up in the morning and guess what? It's still there. The problem is still going to be there. We can get away from it for a little while, but eventually we have to learn to stop running away from things. We have to start learning how to deal with things in healthy ways so that we're not constantly running away and destroying ourselves and our bodies and bringing on this stress because we just never turn the mirror inwards and start working on the reasons that we're being stressed out in the first place. And it's important to learn how to deal with stress in healthy ways too, guys, because it's inevitable. Life is going to have stressful moments. There's nothing we can do to get away from it. It's a day-to-day thing. It happens. It's part of life. There's never going to be a time in your life where there's going to be zero stress at all, for weeks and months at a time. It's part of life. So we need to start working on ourselves and dealing with those things that are actually inside of us that are leading to kind of some of those addictive behaviors. Because if it's outside of, say, something in the world, like, money stress is a real thing that we have to deal with within ourselves, but we have our own thoughts and internal belief systems that stress us out as well. And we need to start learning about ourselves and getting into our belief systems and things that are potentially leading us to these addictive behaviors in our lives. Okay, for me, it was massive issues with self-worth, body image issues, just not being content with myself, feeling like a failure. Having those things inside of myself drove my belief systems, and it stressed me out, and it led me down negative paths of negative thinking, and I never knew how to deal with them properly. So I turned to addiction because it was just a way to get out of my head. It was a way to get out of my mind. And instead of dealing with the things in a healthy way, I tried to escape them. You try to escape them and you keep running and you keep running and you keep running. And, for a while, a lot of these habits actually worked. But you get to a point in your life where you start to realize that these things are entirely destructive. They're not helping you. And it's like you get into this trap where you're like, beating your head against your wall, trying to make changes in your life, but you keep getting sucked back into your old behaviors and your old habits, and like the subconscious programming and those belief systems are what keeps dragging us back to those behaviors. Okay, so we start waking up to these things and we start recognizing them as an issue. Now we need to work not only on ourselves, but developing good, healthy coping mechanisms for these types of things, okay? And we're not looking like necessarily to replace one addiction with another, but there's ways that we can go about it, and good habits and things that we can have in our lives that help us to move through that stress in healthy ways, okay? Exercise is one of the best examples of this. I've talked in one of my talks about exercise. It's such a good practice for alleviating stress, for getting us out, like just anything in general that gets the body moving. A lot of times that stress is just being stored as energy in our body. Sometimes we just got to get moving. We got to get going, okay? Meditation, I talked about in one of my talks earlier, is another great practice for getting kind of in touch with your emotions, for getting in touch with your feelings, and allowing yourself space to disconnect from your thought processes, because our thought processes are what drives a lot of the addictions, guys. I talked about emotions. We need to get in touch with our emotions. Once we familiarize ourselves with our emotions, it becomes easier to detach from them and allow them the space to exist. I mean, we need to learn sometimes too, guys, to just sit in some discomfort. Like, and not reach for your phone all the time, and not reach for that food, and not reach for that bottle. We need to embrace a certain element of discomfort in order to overcome this. And it's a moment by moment kind of thing. As somebody who's dealt with mental health issues, addictions issues, and even personal growth issues, and even day-to-day mind issues, guys, it's a moment by moment thing, but our focus is our ultimate champion in actually dealing with this, because when we direct our focus, we can utilize our focus to direct our behaviors in different directions. When we catch ourselves in these things where we're reaching for what we know are these maladaptive coping mechanisms, we can consciously make a decision to go in a different direction, okay? And that's why presence and mindfulness practices, and you start to see how all of my tricks and tools kind of start to tie all back in together, because then we can steer the ship in a right direction, okay? And it's like something that we have to get doing, guys, like that movement and those healthy things, because otherwise, if we're sitting in stress all the time, what we tend to do is we focus on it. We sit and we focus on the stressor. So sometimes, you're getting caused severe emotional duress and you're feeling depressed because you're sad and you're grieving, and those are natural human emotions that we need to allow ourselves to feel instead of trying to escape, and we focus on that. Or the anxiety, and you're feeling so anxious, it's almost overwhelming. And you need to get up and get moving, and it can be just challenging, guys. I'm not trying to put any shame or anything on this, but I can tell you unequivocally for myself, the only way I ever got myself out of these states, and the only way I ever dealt with them healthily, was to consciously override that and start doing things that I didn't necessarily want to do, but I recognized were healthy for me on a cognitive level. I knew that a walk was going to make me feel better, and I didn't want to go, but I did it anyways. I knew the gym was going to make me feel better, and I didn't want to do it, but I did it anyways. I knew that, like, eating healthy, sometimes it's easy to it would be just as easy for me to make hamburgers and pizza and that, like, you can have those things all the time, but they ultimately were just making me feel like crap. I used to eat a ton of fast food every single day, and it didn't help. It just exacerbates the situation. And alcohol and whatever it is, guys, we go to those things because they offer a quick dopamine hit and it feels like a quick fix. That's why social media can be so dangerous, and it is an addiction in and of itself. In a lot of ways, it's causing more people brain problems than they actually tend to realize, because when we get that consistent stimulus over and over and over and over again, when we try to slow down and we be in silence, it becomes incredibly uncomfortable, because now we're left alone with nothing but our thoughts. And this is why people don't like to meditate sometimes, because hey, now I'm left with myself. But it's a great practice for recognizing and detaching your thoughts. Like I said, this is such a beneficial practice to understanding that those thoughts and those feelings and emotions, they're not who we are. They're something that we experience, and we have to allow our space to experience them. And sitting in that discomfort is a big thing, guys. Sometimes we just need to be able to, learn to welcome your emotions on as they are. Don't judge them, good or bad. Allow them the space to move through you. Allow them the space to move through you. And the more you slowly allow yourself to feel more, slowly allow yourself to allow the emotions to move through without attaching your thoughts as a byproduct, they start to move through. But we have to start doing some of the work on our side, inside of ourselves, guys. We have to look at the role that we're playing in our own suffering sometimes. Because sometimes, I know for years, I was my own worst enemy. I avoided this like the plague. I didn't want to do this at all. It's not fun work. It really isn't. But the byproduct of it, guys, is you get out to the other side and it doesn't affect you like it did before. And I'm here to challenge you and tell you that, hey, you can do this too. There's nothing magical about me, guys. We're all human beings. We're all experiencing these emotions and do this. And I don't say this to belittle anybody. I do this to try to encourage people so they can see that it's possible, that it can be done through conscious effort, through work, through looking into ourselves and starting to realize why we feel the way we are, why we judge ourselves so much, why we feel like we're worthless. Where do these things come from? We gain that self-awareness. We allow ourselves to process these things. We move through them. And as time goes by, all of a sudden you start to realize that none of these things are bugging you like they were before. We start to learn how to deal with stress healthy and get back and to regulate our internal states. And it doesn't drive the addiction behaviors. And the better we get at doing this, the more work we do on ourselves, guys. As a byproduct, you don't need these behaviors anymore. You'll find yourself not wanting to escape as much because guess what? You're content in your life. You're content in your day-to-day moments. You can handle being here. You want to be here. You want to be in the moment. You're not trying to escape from the moment by any means necessary. You start to embrace your life. You start to live. You start to be present and mindful, and you enjoy being in the world. And that's a byproduct of the work that I did. When I started my path, I started it with a month of not drinking at all was kind of my goal. COVID hit and I got really lucky in some sense, and I don't want to make it sound like COVID was a good thing, but I was in the perfect mind space that I spent a lot of time digging into myself during that process. And as a byproduct of doing that work, my desire to drink and get out just dissipated. I didn't want to do that anymore because I didn't have to. It was always an escape for me. Now, I'm not saying people shouldn't do these types of things, guys. I'm like everything, sometimes we are overwhelmed, and you know what? Doom scrolling is a great thing to do for a bit if you want to dissociate for a while. Going out with your friends, blowing off some steam, maybe even going to the casino, gambling, whatever. If we do it in little bits and doses, it's fine, guys. It's part of life, and we can enjoy those things absolutely as well. But when these become our primary means of coping, it becomes a problem, and it's going to exacerbate itself. It's not going to get better on its own. It's something we need to learn to develop healthy ways to deal with. And even if we're doing a habit that's kind of getting away from it, going to the gym is far less destructive than snorting cocaine is. We have to replace one thing with another because we also need places to place our focus. Our focus is our greatest gift, guys. This is the overpower of the subconscious mind and all the programming and garbage we receive from the news, from the media, from life, from everywhere else. That's kind of our greatest asset is our focus. And we start to really get into that. We start getting deeper into who we are. We start rooting through the layers. We start digging and we start to find out who we are underneath all of these things. So start developing this, guys. Work on this. Feel like What do you go to when you feel stressed? What are those things? Are they healthy for you? Are they serving you? If they're not, then it might be a time to start taking a look at some of those things and seeing which kind of behaviors maybe you could start substituting, once or twice. Maybe you drink, say, 3 nights a week. Well, maybe instead of 3, you get down to 2 off the hop and you go for a walk that one night. And then you realize that, hey, I went for a walk and I felt really, really good. That was way better than like dealing with like drinking. Okay, so the next night, all of a sudden, you start taking little steps, guys. We build, we build, we build. We start small. It's just little things that we can kind of substitute for self-destructive behaviors that are not benefiting us in a healthy way. Okay, guys, so dealing with these things is so important. Learning to deal with stress in healthy ways is so important. We can't just avoid our emotions. We can't just push things down, because eventually they're going to come up and they're going to explode on people, and people are going to, get it, that don't necessarily deserve it. Okay, we need to just start dealing with ourselves. We need to start dealing with the things inside of ourselves, reaching for that coping mechanism. Stop yourself, give it a little bit of space. Why am I doing this? What am I not wanting to feel right now? And stop fighting against your emotions, guys. They're always going to be a part of your life. The better we can get at just kind of embracing them, the better we're going to be in our lives. Okay, emotions are not good and bad. They're always, again, like much like stress, sadness and grief are going to be as much a part of our lives as joy and happiness. It's about navigating the waters, understanding the impermanence of everything. Change is constant. Even when you're going through struggles, eventually things pass. We let them go. But a lot of times, through addiction, we perpetuate the cycle. We make it last longer than it should because we escape having to deal with things in a healthy way. Okay, guys? So lesson number 7, stress, dealing with addictions, and being honest with ourselves about our addictions too, guys. And don't judge yourself. For heaven's sake, please don't judge yourself. When I encourage people to get into the awareness and diving into themselves, none of this is ever done to judge ourselves. It's to understand ourselves. We can love ourselves into evolution, okay? You don't want to change because you hate yourself. We want to love ourselves into evolution. We need to encourage ourselves as we go through this process. And finding people that can help you along the way is so important too, guys, because lots of times we deal with these things by ourselves. We don't want to talk about it because there's a certain level of shame behind it. We're going to talk about that in another video. But connection really helps us to deal with a lot of these things in healthier ways too. Human beings help us to co-regulate ourselves. Being around people who uplift you and make you calm and stuff like that is so empowering when you're dealing with some of these things, and especially going through addictions and stuff like that. When you're really trying to make changes in your life, that support is monumental. It is a beautiful thing. When you have people pushing you and that you can go and know they want what's best for you, and they're going to help you along the way, find those people, be with those people, because I've seen massive transformations in people all over the place, and they did it in communities, okay? So look for those people. Find those healthy outlets for that stress, guys. Find those good coping skills. Find those things that don't necessarily make you want to be avoidant, that you want to go to, that are going to help you. But then understand there's ultimately some discomfort that needs to be embraced here. But the more you get comfortable in discomfort, the more you're going to be able to grow. In fact, a lot of what you're going to be able to accomplish on your growth journey is how much you're going to be able to embrace discomfort. We talked about this with the brain and how the brain loves what's familiar to it. We're just making changes. We make the unfamiliar familiar. And as these new coping mechanisms become more familiar with them, eventually you're going to see that you're not reaching for those things as much as you used to. And then you can celebrate those wins, and you see that you're on the path, and it just encourages you, and the momentum keeps going, and it's a snowball effect. Okay, guys? So lesson number 7 is dealing with stress in healthy ways, how it leads to addictions in our lives, and starting to develop healthy coping mechanisms. All right. So that's talk number 7. Thanks a lot for being here. I hope you guys are finding some use out of these videos. If you need some assistance with any of these things, I can help coach you, guide you through this process. You can find me on Facebook at Re-Mind Yourself, and on Google, and I am on Instagram at Remind Yourself Coach, and on TikTok at Re_Mind Yourself Coach. And you can follow me there. We're going to do daily wellness tips. I'm going to start doing lots of talks about the subconscious mind, our mind, because our mind is so much of what plays into this and how to deal with that in healthy ways. So hopefully I can gain you some wisdom along the way there. So thanks again for being here, guys. We'll see you all on the next talk for talk number 8. Have a great night.